When lockdown started in 2020, I had to face something that I'd feared for years. I had to shop online, and I absolutely hate shopping online. On one day, I received a package with 2 pairs of the same trainers, same size, same colour. So I checked my confirmation email, and it turns out I had accidentally ordered 2 of exactly the same items. I'm not sure if you've had any frustrating experiences with an online purchase, but I've had many. My name is Beatrice, and I'm a behavioural science consultant. I'm fascinated by human behaviour. My background is neuroscience and digital marketing, and I've become increasingly involved in the field of behavioural science to improve digital journeys. I get excited about clever use of behavioural science, but today I'm here to talk about the dangers of mindless use of behavioural techniques. Receiving 2 of the same items was a really negative experience for me. Not only did I feel a little bit silly, but I had to send the trainers back, I had to pay for delivery, and I felt really guilty about the impact this was going to have on the environment. A few weeks later, I realised I'd done exactly the same thing on another purchase too, which might say something about how useless I am at shopping online. However, the curious side of me wanted to see if any other online retailer had thought to prevent people from mistakenly checking out with 2 items in their shopping cart. I started to test various retailers out, and of the 37 that I tested, only 1 retailer gave me the notification to ask, did you mean to add 2 items to your cart, to prevent me from making this error? This one retailer has added what we call in user experience friction to their checkout journey to help try and alleviate this problem. Typically, when designing user experiences, the aim is to let the customer check out as quickly and as seamlessly as possible, or remove the number of clicks required before the checkout. Over the last few years, we've even seen large online retailers patenting ways to get people to check out with just 1 click, without having to input any of their payment details. Although my example with purchasing too many trainers may seem a little trivial, there's a serious message here, and we need to address it in different ways, which I'll outline later. A friend told me how her 72-year-old mother-in-law was recently evicted from her house as she failed to pay her rent. As the family were clearing out her house, they found boxes upon boxes of these unopened, unworn items that she'd bought online. Prada, Gucci, Louis Vuitton, gold. This is a 72-year-old woman with a serious online buying addiction. Yes, we need to help businesses sell more online, but where is the line between encouraging sales and helping fuel poor decisions and addictions online? So my unmuted question is this: if we can use data to help sell more, can we use data and insights to help people online? I'm going to talk through 3 behavioural techniques founded in behavioural science that either add or remove friction to online experiences. These are present bias, cognitive strain, and dummy pricing. In order to illustrate a point a little later, can you help me by reading all the words to yourself written on this blackboard, please? Okay, I'll come to that a little bit later. Now, in order to understand what works for people, we first need to understand how they think. One recent principle that began the behavioural economics movement is the idea that we have 2 different ways of thinking, System 1 and System 2 thinking. Essentially, System 1 thinking is unconscious, it's effortless, it's automatic. Like when you have to walk to work, you don't really have to think about it too much. And System 2 thinking is conscious, it's effortful. Like when you get given a maths problem and you have to really think to work it out. There aren't really 2 separate areas in the brain, but it's a helpful way for behavioural scientists to illustrate that there are different ways of thinking that get different results. Now, traditional UX advice is to encourage System 1 thinking, the automatic and conscious one. Currently on Instagram, they've used System 1, but creating this frictionless experience which uses the infinite scroll. It allows people to keep scrolling and liking easily, and you're fed this continuous reel of content. You don't have to think. They've now added friction to this experience by telling people you're all caught up when they've seen all the content in their feed. This provides the person with the opportunity to engage their System 2 thinking and stop scrolling. So now I'm going to run you through a few commonly used biases so you can become aware of how you're encouraged not to think. We've all been in a situation where we've put things off to tomorrow, like planning to start training for a marathon next week, or I'll go on my diet on Monday, or I'll make sure that I write that presentation way before the deadline. That's because we tend to overvalue enjoyable experiences in the present at the expense of the future. This is known as present bias, the first behavioural technique that removes friction and exploits System 1 unconscious thinking. It's a bit like we have two selves, our present selves and our future selves. Our present selves tend to make decisions that give us immediate gratification. They're very driven by System 1 unconscious motivations. At the same time, we seem to think that our future selves are going to have this amazing willpower, they're going to be really focused, they're going to do everything we want them to do. It gives us permission to procrastinate. Of course, when that day comes in the future, we're just another slightly older present self. Retailers use present bias to their advantage on digital journeys all the time. For example, retailers encourage people to buy the product now and pay for it later. It's become so popular because it works so well. We want pleasure now and pain later. We all know that this could become potentially problematic for our future selves if we're unable to afford the debt and receive a charge as a result. One of the most important ways, or very common ways, that use present bias is subscription services, who give customers offers to sign up for a free trial now and pay for it later. It's so tempting, you can't help but sign up to the free trial. Now, if you could think back to that blackboard slide that I showed you, do you remember any of the words written on that blackboard? And if you can just quickly say them to yourself or jot them down really, really quickly. Well, typically, you're most likely to remember the words circled on the screen here. The reason being that these are the words with the missing letters. The blackboard game is an example of cognitive strain. The second behavioural technique that adds friction. You have to think harder to read the words with the missing letters, and you've therefore activated System 2 thinking, conscious effortful thinking, and you've increased cognitive strain, which increases memorability. If we look back to really quickly how memory works, very simple terms, a stimulus is encoded in our brains, it has to be stored, and to remember it we have to retrieve it. So when we think harder, we're essentially increasing the effort that we put into encoding that memory, and that increases the likelihood of storage and therefore retrieval. Another note here is the more emotion at the point of encoding, the more likely you are to remember it too. So in this example, adding friction to make people think harder can increase memorability for brands and experiences. Bear in mind that conventional wisdom says that frictionless experiences are better, which is worth questioning if they're also unmemorable. Another example I'll talk through is used in coffee shops. More often than not, there's an option to buy a really huge cup of coffee, often as big as a bucket, when no one really ever buys that size. And the brand usually know it too. So why is it there? By presenting a price range, the customer can see what's cheap, normal, or expensive, regardless of the actual price they use, which is often called dummy pricing. A dummy price influences our perception of what is normal or reasonable price. In the coffee example, most people wouldn't choose the third most expensive coffee. That's the dummy price. But having this option drives more people from the lowest to the less expensive item, the middle price option. We're guided by the way things are presented all the time. Like when you go to order a bottle of wine on the menu at a restaurant. Most people don't tend to go for the cheapest option because they don't want to look like a cheapskate. They go for the second cheapest. Restaurants know this, and exactly the same techniques are used in digital checkouts, which help to increase the value of sales. Price ranges are convenient, but do they encourage us to spend more than we actually need to? We know that behavioural techniques can help marketing and sales, and if we continue to design frictionless experiences across all contexts at the given rate, our digital future looks really bleak. But how do we make a change in an environment where all these tools have already been so heavily used and businesses believe that frictionless experiences are the only route to success? So what can we do? Businesses need to shift their thinking. friction can actually increase engagement, which is not how businesses currently think. We saw earlier that being frictionless actually makes you memorable. And adverts that make you think and have more narrative actually often have much more long-term value. Behavioural science can be the cause of many of these problems online, but they can also be the solution to help our digital experience better for the customer and for the business. There's currently no policy in online retail. I believe we need tighter regulations or restrictions, or at the very least, more helpful guidelines. I'd like to propose that we think about it like this. I've developed a framework as an ethical guideline to help businesses decide how much and where to use friction in a given journey. The framework assesses the level of impact on the customer and the level of consideration required by the customer for a given purchase. For example, if you were to buy toothpaste, the customer's choice has a low impact, so you might not have to worry too much about ethics. The customer probably knows what toothpaste they like, they probably bought it many times before, and in this case, businesses should be thinking about how to use friction to enhance the user's experience, increase memorability. That's the bottom left quadrant. However, if you're signing up to a loan online, this has a high impact on the customer and requires a high level of consideration. In this case, the journey should be adding friction throughout to ensure that the customer is making the right informed choice. That would sit in the top right quadrant. Purchases and journeys that fall under this quadrant are the most important for us to focus on and prioritise. So if we are creating frictionless journeys for highly consequential decisions, it can have devastating consequences for the vulnerable customer. People have been championing customer rights in offline retail environments for years, yet designing a customer-centric experience in digital has only just begun. And it's so far it's only been based around conversion metrics. We need to demand more digital empathy or human support in one way or another. I personally think that our future selves will look back at our present selves and we will laugh at the digital experience that we tolerated. I believe we can create a more engaging and more thoughtful future using clever behavioural science instead of lazy behavioural science. This is just the beginning of our digital future, so let's design it with the most important thing at the heart of it all, the human at the end of the digital interface.